Good morning, everybody. I hope you had a good morning and you liked the keynote, and I wish you a great 3 days here and can learn a lot. So this is going to be a very fast session. It's only 45 minutes, so I need to talk very fast. So my name is Lino Tadros. I'm actually a cloud solution architect for a company called Soliance. I'm also the president and CEO of a company called Events XD Corporation. I've been a C# MVP for Microsoft for 15 years and a Telerik MVP and developer expert for a lot of time, since 2005. I used to work for a company called Borland in the old days. Anybody remember that company? All right, sounds good. Old people like me. So I worked there for 10 years on Delphi and C++ compilers as an R&D engineer. And I worked on behalf of Microsoft as a speaker in a lot of different conferences in 52 different countries so far in the last 25 years. I also had the pleasure of being a chief architect on a lot of different projects, from Johnson & Johnson to NASA to Disney to Microsoft, and till today I do a lot of work for Microsoft as well for their IoT team, AI and machine learning as well. I've written 7 books on Sitefinity, and I'm the original author of the Sitefinity certification exam. And I have a couple of different Pluralsight Sitefinity courses, and lately for Sitefinity 11 and 12, I have my own online demand videos on thetrainingboss.com as well. I like to dabble with a lot of different technology, but for the last couple of years, it has been heavily on AI and machine learning. So if you have any interest in that, after the session, maybe we can go get a drink and we talk about that if you would like to know how to integrate that into Sitefinity or any other product as well. This is a 45-minute talk, so it's going to be very fast. So guess what? This is the last slide. We don't have time for PowerPoint. I'm going to go jump straight into Visual Studio and start talking about some tips and tricks and MVC and so on. My goal here is to give you an introduction what is MVC inside of Sitefinity 12. By the way, congratulations to the Sitefinity team. Sitefinity 12 just shipped at 8 o'clock this morning, so that's a great thing. So congratulations for the whole team. I'm a brave man, so I just installed it at 8:05. All right, so I'm now going to give the session on something I've seen exactly the same amount of time you did. So if it doesn't work, it's their fault. If it works, I did a great job. All right, that was good. No, I'm just kidding. It's important to talk a little bit when we start getting into Visual Studio about the naming convention. It's very important to understand a lot of times when we work in MVC, in Visual Studio, without Sitefinity even, you need to really embrace naming conventions and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to be fighting a lot of times against the way the product wants to work. So when they tell you the controller needs to be called this way or the model, trust them. Try not to write a lot of code to actually work against that grain. And we're going to see that a lot of things regarding the Razor syntax for the views and so on. I also, I'm going to be introducing you to Feather and see what that brings to the table, especially for views, and also some naming convention for Feather. It's a free open source product actually that comes with Sitefinity. We'll talk about the new Sitefinity V6 and the CLI. And that's a new free tool for Visual Studio that will allow you to create widgets automatically, like the templates, so you don't have to write much code. It has a built-in templates for widgets, for grid widgets, and so on and so forth. I will talk a little bit about widget designers. Again, all the stuff will happen in 45 minutes, so we're going to have to move fast. Widget designers are very important. They could be written for MVC. They can be written in web forms. Don't do that. Or you can actually do them in Angular, which is definitely the preferred way to do it. I'm not going to touch at all on web forms and anything in this session. We don't have any time for that at all. And if you're doing it, it's like smoking, really. If you're doing it, you need to stop. And if you're not doing it, you need to stay away from it anyway. So, all right, good. We're going to talk about some of the problems people find actually out of using MVC widgets inside of Sitefinity. Most likely when you have multiple MVC widgets on the same page, but some of them have different action results than others. So there is a problem that shows up regarding some of them disappearing on the page because they don't implement that. And we'll show you definitely the easy way of taking care of these problems as well. I also wanted to spend the last maybe 5 minutes or so showing you the resource packages inside of Sitefinity in Visual Studio to let you know how you can actually change the built-in widgets, whether it's for news or blogs or events or anything else that you'd like to change or create your own. And again, we need to concentrate on the naming convention. So once you embrace that, actually working with Sitefinity is actually pretty easy once you embrace how the whole thing works. I hope you enjoyed my PowerPoint presentation and have a good day. All right, let's go ahead and start doing the real product. So I took the time this morning when I installed Sitefinity 12 to go create a Hello World website that doesn't have any pages or images or content, completely empty, so we don't have to waste time with that. And I open it up in Visual Studio, and that is the entire full structure. Hopefully you can see it okay. It's not focused. Anyway, you're gonna have to trust me, there is some files here on the right. No, I'm just kidding. When you open it up inside of Sitefinity, there is a folder here called MVC with a capital M in it. Some people like to feel like, I don't like the folder. I'd like to put my MVC widget somewhere else. Don't do that. That's another thing that actually people make a mistake saying, I can actually create my MVC control anywhere I want. And of course you can, but you're going to have to spend so much time writing routing code to tell the system how it works. And the reason for that is that it's hybrid. You can have one page that contains MVC widgets and web forms widgets. It is not an easy task what actually Sitefinity did to be able to allow you to use hybrid pages like this. It's actually a lot of work because there is routing, web forms want to do one way, and routing for the MVC one way. So you have to really embrace the fact that they wrote the code built in to make sure that there is an MVC folder and all the controllers, models, and views will go under that folder. So embrace that and let's move on with life, all right? Don't move it somewhere else. If you open up the MVC folder in here, there will be 3 built-in folders. One is called controllers, one is called models, and one is called views. The good thing about these 3 folders is that if you're familiar with MVC, anybody here have never used MVC before? All right, so no problem. So, so MVC is a model view controller. Is the idea behind it is to actually try to fix some of the problems that actually shipped in the year 2000 with web forms. Web forms was a great when it came out with the code behind, but it had some evil things like view state, for instance, which MVC does not have. So it's a lot more scalable. It actually it is done so that it accepts a lot more requests per second, heavily a lot more requests per second. So the site is a lot more scalable. It does not have to have any view state garbage inside of the pages and all that stuff. Plus, of course, they wanted to separate church and state. They want the coder to write the code in the controller and somebody who's designing the database to work in the models for going to get the data, whether it's from open access or entity frameworks or Hibernate, whatever you would like, you can definitely use. And then your designer, the one that will make things look good, will need to only care about the views folder where all the views will be there. So that will actually hopefully have a separation between church and state for that kind of stuff. And it's working pretty well. And Sitefinity did a great job trying to make that happen as well. All right, so if I wanted to actually create a widget right now in Sitefinity, what can I do? First of all, I can ignore Sitefinity and create the MVC widget directly in Visual Studio itself, as if I don't even know that Sitefinity is there. So you will go to the MVC, for instance, folder, and you can say add, and notice there is all the way at the top something called controller. And if you configure that, it will actually allow you to create an MVC5 pure controller. And that will work just fine. It will even create a view for you as well. And now it's your responsibility to create a model and so on. The nice thing about this is instead of just doing everything from scratch like this, which you can actually use that tool that I told you about. It's called Sitefinity V6. And if you don't have it, you can go to the Tools menu in Visual Studio, click on Extensions and Updates, and go in here to Online and look for something called Sitefinity V6. Actually, if you just look for the word Sitefinity, it will come up right here. I have it installed already. In your case, there will be a button here that says Install. Click on it. It will take about a few seconds, and you'll have V6 installed on your machine. What does that add to Visual Studio? What it will add is that when you come and open up or right-click on the Sitefinity web app, the project itself, when you click on Add in here, it will add something at the bottom. It says Sitefinity. See that? That is there because we have installed the V6 tool. And easily, you can actually create a new resource package, a new page template, or a grid widget, or a widget. I mean, I can talk about all of them, but unfortunately, because of the time, I'm just going to concentrate on the widget piece as well. But for the next 3 days, please stop me anywhere you see me, and we can talk about any of them if you want. I'm here for 3 days. I have one more session tomorrow, and after that, we can sit down and talk about any of them if you'd like. So I'm going to click on widget in here, folks, and automatically, Sitefinity will bring up or the Sitefinity V6 will bring up this wizard that will allow me to give it a name and a default template. Right now, there is only a default template, but again, You can actually change or add more templates if you want. So you can actually maybe create a widget with specific properties, with specific public properties or private or whatever. But this right now, when I create one, it will just do a hello world. It will create a controller, will create a model, and the model will have one automatic property called string message, just as a test, and a view that will just say hello world. And it's up to you after that, but all the plumbing and all the files needed to create that widget will be created for you automatically. Even the registration for the widget will be created for you as well. So let's come on here and say, for instance, Orlando is the name of my widget. I'll call it Orlando, we'll say okay. It will embrace, notice there is this command line that popped up for a second. There's the CLI that runs from the command line. And if you take a look here now on the right side, if I refresh this, you will notice that the MVC folder under controller, there is an Orlando controller. And notice that I only call it Orlando, but the good news is it actually added the word controller at the end of the name. And that's a good thing. When you create these files, always make sure that the controller ends with the word controller. That will save a lot of time regarding the convention of how things are going to be created in the system. Don't just call it Orlando, for instance. It should have the word controller in it. Also in the models, it will create a Orlando model.cs. And under views in here, we'll create a folder with the name of your widget, which is Orlando. And then underneath it, we will have some Razor syntax files that will be the view for that widget. So these are all the files that got added. A controller C# file, a model C# file, and a view folder with an index.cs.html. And we will see later what this designer view is. That's going to be the widget designer that got created for us automatically. So let's open up the model and see what exactly got generated. Notice it created a class here called Orlando model. And just for testing, they created a public string message property. It's an automatic property getter and setter. So you can come in here and add more properties. You can create classes in that file. Find a way to go get your data model somehow. So, of course, Sitefinity has open access built into it, and that's an ORM tool. You don't have to use that if you don't want to. If your company uses NT Framework or NHibernate or anything like that, you're more than welcome to do all your models in here to be able to get that data somehow. Once the data is in here, you will be able to use it in the controller and then passing it on as a model automatically to the view. So your designer, the one that's creating all the nice looking view, doesn't have to know, or he or she doesn't have to know actually how the data got there or how the controller is generating all that code. So that is a good way of separating that from each other. So I'm going to leave it like that for right now, and let's go to see the controller, which is a very important piece. The one thing I wanted to show you what got created in here is our class called Orlando controller. And it descends from controller. I usually like to spend an extra minute here to explain that this is a big deal, this word controller in here. Unlike other competitor products, this is not Sitefinity's controller. This is the real controller coming from Microsoft. If you put the cursor over it, it will tell you this is coming from system.web. .MVC. That means this is a good thing. If there is an update, if they fix something in the controller class in Microsoft, you get it right away using that update. You don't have to wait for a new version from Sitefinity to go out to do that. Not all CMS systems out there do this, so that's a good thing for us to know this as well. Action result. What is an action result? Usually at the end of the day, let's say for instance I create a home page, right? And on that home page I have the Orlando widget on top of that page. Action results means which one of these action results will fire when I go to the URL and say, let's say localhost, for instance, here for locally, /home/index. That means I'm at the home page and I'm asking for the index in here. So every single widget on that screen, on that page, that has an action results called index, all of them will fire. I don't have to have only one MVC. I might have like 5 of them. So it will say, okay, these 5 MVC widgets, one of them is called Orlando. We're requesting /index. Each one of them will fire up their index action result. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 10, doesn't matter. We're going to see later on a problem. What happens if I have 2 MVC on the page, and one of them has an index and also another action results called Lino, for instance. So it has 2. And the other one only has index. So what happens when I say /home/index? Everybody is happy because both of them have an index. But when I say /Lino, only one of them has Lino. The other one doesn't have Lino. What happens? It disappears from the page, and that's something we don't want. And I'm not going to go ahead and implement Alino for every single MVC widget I will ever have, right? That would be silly. So hopefully there is something that will help us with that, and we will take a look at that in a few. Also, at the bottom in here, you see it created a public property that's different than the one in the model. So the controller also has a public string message. It doesn't even have to be the same name, okay? This is just by convention. We created a model that has a property called message, and here in the controller, I have a property called message. What is the difference between the two? Sitefinity will end up using something called reflection to automatically show you all the public properties in your controller in the designer. So now when I drop the MVC control, for instance, the widget on the page, there will be the edit on the top right of the placeholder, right? If you click on it, it will go ahead and read all the public properties where in the controller, not in the model. So it will find out that you have one called message of type string. So it will automatically have a label called message, and underneath it will be a text box. There is no code in here, as you can see, that will tell Sitefinity how to save whatever you're going to type into that, into the database, or bringing back from the database whenever I bring back the dialog next time. All the stuff is done for you automatically by Sitefinity. So it saves you a lot of time. The reflection will do all the job for you. So you can have tons of different properties in here, and all the stuff is done for you in the database automatically behind the scenes. Everybody with me so far? Please also feel free. I know we don't have a lot of time, but it's important. I know it will help everybody. If you have questions, go for it. It will help everybody in here as well. Another thing you need to be aware of is that when I created the widget using the V6, Sitefinity V6, it actually made all the files grayed out. That means they are not included in the project. It is your responsibility to come here and right-click and make sure that when you build the project, they will be part of the build. Otherwise, it's not even part of the project right here. So I'm going to go right-click on Orlando controller and we'll say include in project. And now it is. I'll go to the Orlando model and we include it in the project. And I'm going to go to the Orlando folder in here under views, and I'm going to bring the whole thing inside of it and include it in the project. Sounds good? All right, there is one thing that got created for us as well. A lot of people don't notice what it is. It created actually another folder called scripts inside of the MVC folder. If you open up the scripts folder, you will notice there is an Orlando in here. That's the name of the widget. And underneath it, there will be a JS file called designerview-simple.js. If I double click this guy, you will notice there is some Angular code in here. One of the best things actually about the new framework to be able to use Angular, which is built into Sitefinity, is it will create a properties collection for all your widgets. The good thing is it's using Angular behind the scene as soon as it starts up Sitefinity. If you have a public property, automatically there is a properties, you probably can see it in here for the property service. There is a properties collection, this guy in here, that will contain all the public properties. And it will be Angular responsibility to set it to the database or get it from the database into the widget itself. You don't have to do anything at all. How many people have used the old Sitefinity way, like Thunder and web forms and stuff like that? Anybody? All right, there's a few people. If you remember how much code that was needed to create a designer, for instance, that have like 3 or 4 properties, it was about 500 lines of code to do that, because you had to implement it in code behind, and you had to implement it in JavaScript, and you have to do the refresh UI, and so both ways have to be written. Thunder, if you remember Thunder, helped us a lot with the template of these 500 lines. You still had to go and add things to it and so on. Nowadays, you can do the whole 500 lines in less than 5 lines with Angular. So it makes it much, much easier, and I definitely recommend for you to not use web forms for a widget designer anymore. There is no reason for it. And if you can concentrate about what exactly is it doing, once you know how it works, you don't even have to touch it anymore. As a matter of fact, this file in here, using the scope for the control that we're creating, even if I add more properties, there is no reason actually for you to come and change this. Sitefinity actually made a decision to show this file. Before, they actually didn't even show this file. It was just the same file everywhere. But now they show it because some people wanted to change the way the provider was sending the information back and forth. If you want to go that deep and change that, you are more than welcome to do this. Otherwise, there is no reason for you to actually make any changes in this file whatsoever. Let's go ahead and see the view index.cshtml. So in here, the first thing you will have at the top of the page is a Razor syntax that says add model. It's a small, it's not a capital M in here, as you can see that. That means we are importing the model from the controller. How did this come to the view? If I go back to the controller in here, folks, you will notice that I created an instance of the model in my controller. I assigned a property called message to what came from the model. And then I said return view model. When I say return view model, what exactly I'm saying? I'm saying return the CS.html or the Razor syntax view. But the Razor syntax view is called index.cs.html. Shouldn't I actually have here the name of that view? And the answer is sure you can, but the default inside of MVC is that whatever the name of the action result is, that is expected to be the same name as the file. So for instance, if I come in here, right click and say rename that file to default.cs.html, and my action result is called index, how am I going to fix this? You'll have to go into the return view, and the first thing here will say default, like this, comma, and then the model. So you will have to pass the name. You don't put .cs.html, just the name of whatever the name of the CS.html is. But the good news is, if you're going to call them exactly the same thing, like index and index, you don't have to pass it. It's only when it's different between the name of the action result and the name of the CS.html. Everybody with me so far? So that's important as well. The model will be passed. So that means whenever I open up the index.cs.html for the view, I already received the model. So in this index.cs.html, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to get the Orlando model, which has the property message in it. And now I can actually use Razor syntax to do a for each, while loop, use any code you want inside of here to be able to display whatever you want from what came in the model. So my model in here with a capital M. Notice the import is with a small m, and every time you want to use the model is a capital M. So very important. A lot of people also on the community for progress asked that question. It didn't work because you're using probably the wrong model in the different places. So at model.message, you can come here after the dot, put a control space, and see everything available for the model that came in. So if you have multiple properties, all of them will show up in here. So the good news is, whether you're using HTML5 and using Razor syntax, oh, thank you very much, you will be able to see all your properties that come in from that model and do whatever you want with it. So let's say, for instance, I'm using news, right? And I would like to actually iterate through all the news and display them my way. So you'll be able to bring in the model for the news, for instance, and then you'll say for each var item in model.items, maybe you have like 10 press releases, that means the for each will go 10 times, and now you'll have access to every single property in the item, item.author, item.summary, item.content, you see what I'm saying? And also, not only for the built-in one, if you end up creating your own module, maybe you create an employee module, or an HR module, or a medical, something completely outside of Sitefinity, that's a dynamic content. You can do exactly the same thing for each var item into the model.items, and then you can reiterate through the whole thing again. Does that make sense? All right, so I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to compile this. And by the way, how does Sitefinity know that we have a new widget? I just wrote the code. I didn't register anything. So if I run this right now inside of Sitefinity, how is it going to find out that there is a new widget called Orlando that I can actually display somewhere? That is happening now in the controller itself. So if you take a look above the class that we created, the V6 utility have actually created an attribute called controller toolbox item. That is coming from Sitefinity itself, okay? And that attribute will allow you to give it a name. We'll call it Orlando MVC, and the title is Orlando. And I can choose which section I would like to put this in. Let's say, for instance, this will be next 2019, okay? That will be the section, like we have content and navigation and so on. There will be a new section called next 2019, and my widget will be right there. In the old days, if you remember, in web forms, you had to register that in a config file, otherwise the system will not see it. Now there is no registration. This one-liner will take care of all the registration. All right, so let's go ahead and save this. We'll save the solution, and I'm going to right-click on the build, and we'll say build. It will build the whole, it's completed, and I can now run it instead of IIS Express using Chrome, for instance. We'll say yes, okay, let's go ahead and debug it, that's fine. And it will take about maybe 50 to 60 seconds the first time because it has to build the entire system. So if you're a developer, how many people are new to developing in Sitefinity? All right, I have a confession to you. I hope you like gears. All right, because you're going to see these gears a lot. All right? All right, so let me go ahead and it's starting. It's going to open up Chrome right now, and it's going to actually deploy the site to Chrome, and it will be able see the session here says extension for the V6 likely costs 13 seconds of unresponsiveness. Disabling maybe improve the experience. Forget about that. And we'll wait for it to load in here. It's going to load it inside of Chrome. We'll give it another few seconds in here. While this is compiling and finishing up, feel free to ask any questions at any time. It will be my pleasure to answer it for you while this is compiling. So. All right, so there we go. It's now loading Chrome, and it's going to do that. You're going to see the gears turning. What is that gears thing? That gears thing is actually it's compiling the whole thing, and it's creating huge amount in the temporary files of Windows. And that's I mean, sometimes you can notice how much, sometimes it's half a gig worth of information being created in the temp while this is happening. So there is your famous gears. Get used to it. You're going to probably be dreaming about that at night after you work with Sitefinity for a couple of months. How can you actually make this faster? I get asked that question a lot by customers as well. So one of the things I did, I invested my best $25 ever, and I went and got a product called RAM Disk. And RAM Disk, you can install it on your machine after you pay the $25, and you can take some of your RAM. I have 32 gig on my RAM. I take 8 gig of those, and I make it my drive D. So now I have one of the drives that is faster than my SSD. And I say this is my drive D, and I go to the web.config file, and there is one line. It's available on my blog, linotadros.com. You can get that line. And you can tell it whenever you create the temporary files, the half a gig thing, use the D drive. So now, whenever we actually run this, it takes about half the time. Why? Because it's actually using your RAM as you're swapping with the temp. So it goes much faster. It's not going to be like poof like that. It will still take some time, but it halves the amount of time it's taking. So if you're doing this all day long in your job, you might want to invest the $25. It will actually make you younger. All right. All right. So there is my welcome to Sitefinity 12. That's the home page I created earlier. And I'm going to log in using the /Sitefinity in the back end in here. We'll come in here and we'll say Lino at eventsxd.com, and in here will be admin 1234. There you go. And that will open up the back end. What I'm interested in to do now is that now that Sitefinity started, I will open up the home page. We'll hopefully find a new section on the right side called Next 2009, and I'm going to drag the new Orlando widget, and we'll see how it works. And again, Sitefinity, once you deploy it on production, it's actually a pretty decent, very fast system. When you're developing and there is debugging involved and localhost and running IS Express and all the compilation on first hit, it looks like it's taking a long time. But if you're not going to be changing anything in the code, it's only the first hit. After that, all the pages are very, very fast. So you don't have to worry about the time it's taking in the beginning when you hit the first time. And if I had more time, we can actually talk about other modules for warm-up and all that stuff. But remember, there is ways to make this a lot faster as well in the system. All right, so there is the home page. I'm going to open it up in design mode. And hopefully as soon as this comes back, on the right side of the screen, we'll have about maybe 70 or 80 different widgets available out of the box. And one of them will be our new Orlando in here. So let's give it another couple of seconds in here. There we go. And I'm going to collapse content. And notice there is Next 2019 got created based on my attribute that I created. And there is the Orlando one in here. Let's drag this guy and put it in the column 2, for instance. We'll release this and wait for something to show up, and nothing will show up. Remember what the index.cshtml did? It just says at model.message. What is the value of message right now? It's nothing. So there is nothing. So this is working correctly. So if I click on edit now, the system will automatically show me a design that says your new message, and then there is a text box. So I can come in here with, say, Lino, for instance, like this. I didn't write any of that code. When I say save, how is that going to go into the database and how to bring it back and persist it? All the stuff is automatic. So I'm going to say save there, and it's done. Now Lino will show up in here because @model.message is showing up there. Everybody with me so far? The questions I have to ask for, how did it know to put the word your new message and Lino? Who did this for us? If I go back to Visual Studio in here, folks, notice there is above the index.csv.html, Sitefinity V6 created for you a simple designer view. It's called designerview.simple.csv.html. If you open this guy up, that will be the markup that got created. There is your new message, and there is an input type of type text, and then there is an ng model. This is the part that saves you about 500 lines of code. So you don't have to write the old code. You can actually use the ng model because it's built into Sitefinity. And you can use the properties collection, and you have to spell the name of the property exactly like it is in the controller with a capital M. It has to be identical. And then you can get the property value from it. And that's a two-way. It will go back and forth to be able to save it from the database and from your dialog. So my question to you is, what happens if I go and I delete this? If I delete this designerview.simple.csv.html, delete it completely. What would happen when I click on edit at this point? It will still work, but it will not look like that. What happens is built into Sitefinity, if you don't have a designer, it will actually go ahead and read all your public properties, and it will automatically reflect them. So we will have the same designer, but it will say message, that's the name of the property, and then underneath it will be a text box, and you go ahead and fill it up. So it will still work, but here we'll show you just the V6 is trying to tell you, hey, there is a way to create designers and do whatever you want inside of it as well. If you don't, you can actually let the advanced one, Sitefinity will do the job for you as well. Does that make sense? So how can I create designer views or these designers? Well, the first word has to be called designer view with a capital D and a capital V. It has to be that name. If you say .simple, that means the original designer. Can I create more designers? Absolutely. In MVC, you can do that. We wouldn't be able to do that in web forms. So I can create another file in here, call it designerview.lino.csv.html. You can call it anything after the first dot, but designer view has to be in there, okay? So why would I actually want to create two? One simple and one Lino, for instance, two designer view. Why would I want to do that? Maybe if you're the admin on the site, when you click on edit, you want to show them a completely different designer than the rest of the users of the site. Maybe you have per group. There is an API in Sitefinity called isEnroll. So you can say, if you're an administrator, this is the designer we're going to show you. If you are a user, if you're a developer, this is what we're going to show you. So you can actually show different things on different designers. So the question is now, how is the system going to know which one to show us? Right? There is all these designer views, simple, Lino, all these things. How is it going to actually find out? Well, if you have multiple ones, you can actually create another file inside of the Orlando in the views in here. And that file will have to be a designer view for a JSON file. And that JSON file, you can have some JSON and say priority 1 for a specific one. So you can say that the designer view simple.json, that is priority 1. That means if nothing else actually is driving which one to show, whoever has priority 1 is the one that will show automatically. And then at the bottom of designer, I don't know if you saw it or not, see there is an advanced button in here. So this is the one from my designer view.simple. If I click on advanced, which one will I get? The one built in by reflections. If I click on advanced, there it is, message and Lino. If I delete that file called designer view.simple, this is the one you're going to get right away. So what happens if I say designer view.admin.csv.html? There will be two buttons here, one called simple and the other one called advanced. So you can have as many buttons at the bottom in here for all your designer views. It might look ugly. You might actually want to write code to say, only if you're enrolled, you can see that button. So you can actually decide who can see these buttons and who can't. Some people tell me sometimes, I really do not want to show the advanced button. Can I actually turn it off? I just want them to see my simple and no way to do. All the stuff is in the JSON file. You can turn off all the other designer views completely. So that's a good thing that you can do for the designer views. Does that make sense? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All righty, let's open up the Visual Studio again. So let's go ahead and create another one because I wanted to show you a problem, really, so you can understand how that stuff works. And I can't believe we only have 10 minutes left. We need another 3 hours. Anyway, so I'm going to go in here. Let's stop this from running one more time. And really quickly, we'll go to the V6 again. We'll say add. And we'll say Sitefinity, and we'll click another widget, and we'll care, well, we're in Orlando, so this will be Disney, alrighty? And we'll say okay there. The CLI will run, and I can refresh this, and I will end up with Disney controller, Disney model, and the Disney folder that has all the stuff inside of it. Sounds good? So let's go ahead and right-click on the Disney controller and bring it in the project. Double-click on it. Let me make this a little bit smaller. So there is my control box toolbox for the Disney MVC title, and I'm also going to put it inside of my next 2019 section as well. And let's open up the model. And the model also has a property. That's not the important part. I'm going to leave that to you. You can create whatever code in here to go get your data from whatever, maybe from a web service, from entity framework, do whatever you need in here. And then I'm going to also include it. We'll say include that in the project. And then finally, the Disney folder for the script, we'll bring that in as well. We'll say include in the project. And finally, the view in here will say include that in the project. And in the Disney view folder, I should have also an index.cshtml and the design review simple, exactly like before. There are two different widgets, similar code, yes, but they could be doing something different. All right. So what happens now if I go to the home page and drop both of these widgets on the screen? It will work. It will be no problem, but they both have one index and the property message or whatever properties each one of them have. But I would like to go to the Disney controller and do something else. I would like to copy and paste this action result. And I'm going to paste it in here. And that action results, I want it to be Lino, for instance, okay? And in here, we'll actually say Lino, comma, and push the model, alrighty? I don't need to pass Lino in here if what? If what is the name of my CSHTML. If it's called lino.cshtml, then I don't have to do that, right? So I'm going to go in here to Disney. I'm going to right-click on the index.cshtml, copy it, and paste it. Just for the lack of time, we'll say paste this guy. And now I'm going to rename this guy, and I'm going to call it Lino. Everybody sees what I've done here, folks? So now I have two different CSHTML. That means in the routing, it can take localhost/home/index or localhost/home/Lino. And both of them will serve in a different way. All right, let's go ahead now and compile this. And I am going to go ahead and run it in IS Express one more time. Actually, it's a lot of fun to work with Sitefinity with MVC. If you respect the naming convention, things go very, very fast, and it's pretty solid as well. And there is no limit in what you can do, whether you want to talk to outside products, get web services in, it's pretty fast as well. So I definitely recommend, if you're new to Sitefinity, don't even look back, go MVC way, all the way forward, you will be pretty happy with the product. While this is compiling, I'm hoping also in the next year or two, there will be some kind of resource being put into Sitefinity so we can move into .NET Core. .NET Core would be an amazing addition to Sitefinity. Right now, still the whole infrastructure is running on ASP.NET, the old one, with the MVC on top of that. But if we can actually get the whole thing into .NET Core, you would have an amazing amount of performance. And you can actually run the whole Sitefinity server on a Linux box for $2.50 on AWS or cloud for Azure, for instance. So it would be a really good addition for Sitefinity. Hopefully that will happen. It's a major endeavor, though. It's not like, hey, let's take a couple of months and do that. It's going to be a significant amount of work to do something like this. And if you come to my session tomorrow regarding native script and Sitefinity, you can actually do that now. You can create a .NET Core that does everything you want to do with Sitefinity by using the web services layer. So we're going to do that from native script tomorrow, but I will be explaining how the whole web services world work. But you can create a .NET Core app, and you can administer most of what you want to do in Sitefinity straight from the .NET Core app. You don't have to wait. But if you want to use what's built in right now, it's still based on ASP.NET for that. All right, we're going into the back end for Sitefinity. And now I'm going to drop in the Disney widget as well, so we'll have both of them on the home page. All right, there's my home page. So as you can see, if you're a developer charging per hour, Sitefinity is a great product for you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right. And now we'll close this down. We'll go to next 2019, and there is the Orlando and the Disney. So we'll put them on top of each other. I'm going to go to Disney right underneath this one, and I'm going to say edit, and we'll come in here. We'll say hello, and we'll say save. So now I have my two. It should say Lino and hello right on top of each other when I run this. So let's go ahead and publish this page, and go back and view it as the end user for this site. All right, and now we'll go ahead and see the home page. I'm going to say view. So I just wanted to show you, hopefully you can see it well. The URL says localhost with a port number /home. So, and Lino and hello, both of them are on top of each other. If I go in here after home and I say /index, what am I really doing? You don't have to do it, that's the default. But if you say /index, it means I am calling this page with actually the controller for index. So any MVC controller, on that page that have an index action result will fire. So if I say go, nothing will change. It is actually executing, and both of them have index. So Lino and hello will show. The problem in here, folks, is that if I go in here and I can say /Lino, so /home /Lino, what do you expect to see? Lino is gone, only hello. So people start scratching their heads like, that's not what I want at all. Well, I'm only concentrating on that widget, but why did I lose my other ones? So now people will say, okay, now we have to go back to the Orlando, and we have to implement a new action results called Lino. So if you have 100 different widgets, you're going to have to go create weird indexes that you don't use just to satisfy the others. That doesn't make sense at all, right? So the way to fix this, folks, and it's important to know this, let me get that code. I'm going to copy it from here so I don't have to type it. You will go to every single widget that you are working with, okay? So we'll go to the controller in here. We'll go to the one called Disney controller, and you will go anywhere inside of this class, and you will implement an overridden function. Oops, yeah, I have to stop it from running. Right here. And this overridden function is called handle unknown action by passing in the action name. So for me, the action name is what? Is Lino, right? And this guy has it, but I'm going to put it anyway in case something else shows up in the future that is not implemented in here. So I'm going to say if it is not invoked for the action invoker, return back the index one. That means if you ask me for something, let's say I have a /boo. I don't have an action results called boo anywhere. So instead of disappearing from the page, return the index so that we don't have to miss anything. Does that make sense? So just copy and paste these few lines and put them in every single controller. Even if you have 100 different widgets, all of them should have this. And if you're a third party creating widgets for the market, you always have to have this in here because you don't know how your widget is going to be used. But this is the way to say, if I don't have an implementation for what you're asking me for, go ahead and return the index one and we'll be okay. You have to do this on the Orlando one as well. So we'll come in here, we'll do this. Same exact code, you don't have to change it, but hopefully you can understand that one-liner saying if I don't have that action that you're asking for, don't bail out on me, return the index one, and that's how you implement the unhandle known action. It will work just fine for everything. Just because we don't have except 2 more minutes, I just want to spend some time showing you the resource package. There is a very, very important folder inside of Sitefinity called resource packages. With the release of Sitefinity 12 this morning, they've actually changed something. Now Bootstrap 4 is the first-class citizen of Sitefinity, all right? Most people that have used Sitefinity have probably used Bootstrap 3. It is not available in the resource package, but doesn't have any problem going and downloading Bootstrap 3 from maybe GitHub and putting it in here. So you can have 2 different folders, one for Bootstrap 4, one of Bootstrap 3. If you just want to embrace the new one, just use the Bootstrap 4 in here. It has the entire thing built in, and you'll be very happy with that as well. Usually, if you have things implemented in 3, most likely it will work in 4. 4 has new features that are a lot of fun, so you can actually check on that on the website as well for Bootstrap. So if I open up Bootstrap 4, these have all the assets, the JavaScript and the CSS and the minified version of all the stuff that will be used. Client components, mainly for the fields for the HTML. For instance, the new editor in Sitefinity is great. Actually, during the beta, we had to do something to bring in the Monaco editor for for Sitefinity, but now with today's release, it's actually the one that is by default. It's really excellent, and I hope you will enjoy using the Monaco editor inside of there as well. But sometimes it's not enough, for instance, all the buttons in the editor. Maybe you want to add your own button or combo box and whatever. So you'll have to open up this file, the CSHTML, and this have the configuration for the dialog. Alrighty? For instance, I have a customer that likes to actually take anything inside of the editor and print it out as a PDF. Well, that's not built in. What would I have to do, for instance, if I want to add that functionality, to be able to print whatever is in the editor as a PDF? That is built into the Monaco editor as well. So if I can go in here, see the formatting, the bold, italic, underline, these are all the serialization of the editor. So I can actually go, let's say, strike through, subscript, whatever. I can go anywhere in here, and I can say PDF, PDF. And the system will know what that is, because it's built into the configuration. So once you add that, if you're on the editor, there will be a new button called PDF. Anything inside of the editor will be printed out as PDF right away. So where do you find out all that stuff? Go to the website for Kendo UI, and they have tons of examples to show you how to customize the look and feel. So maybe you want to have your own combo box that has all the CSS with colors inside of it. You can do all the stuff in here, no problem. Alrighty? All right. We'll save this guy. The main reason I want to show you that resource package is because of the MVC one in here. So if I open up MVC and views, every single widget that comes with Sitefinity is right here. So the blogs, the news, the change password, the events, feeds, forums, all of them are in here. Let's say, for instance, I'm doing press releases, and I don't like really the way the view is being shown for me for the news for the lists, for instance. It has the title, then the date, then the summary. I want to change that. So I'll go open up the news in here, and you'll notice there is two files. Let me go a little bit deeper so hopefully you can see it better. All right. You see under news in here, folks, there are two files, list.something.cshtml and detail.something.cshtml. You have to embrace that naming convention. For the listing, that you have all the news on top of each other, that's a list. When you click on one of them, you end up on a page that has only one press release. That's the detail. A lot of the widgets use a list-detail relationship, like the blog post, events, news, and so on. Even your own dynamic module will do that. Of course, if you have something like change password widget, that's not going to have a parent-child relationship, so it will be just a simple CSHTML for that as well. So if I, for instance, I want to actually change the way this looks, like open up the CSHTML, and you'll see the code written for you on behalf of Sitefinity to display that. We have an unnumbered list, for each that goes through every single item in the model. So if I have like 10 press releases, how are they going to display themselves on top of each other? The model, all the way at the top, is coming in from the Telerik Sitefinity front end. Notice it doesn't point to news. And that's one of the things I really wanted to close out with because it's very important. A lot of people will change this when they create your own news widget, and they start getting it from the news model itself. And it will work, but you lose a lot by doing that. You lose all the widget designer that has the tab that has the filtering, the list, and the single, and you don't want to lose that. So whether you're using blogs, events, news, or anything, I would really recommend for you to leave this line intact. It has to be the model's content list view model. All right? Even in your own dynamic stuff, use that line to bring the model. And then when you say model.items, that will get you all the items in your own dynamic module. So it's the best way, so you don't have to do much work in the designer. You will still have the 3 tabs and everything. And then you'll see the for each is going through all the 10 different items in the news. I can check if we have inline editing turned on or not. I can save my navigation URL, so when I click on one of them, it will go to that page. And then we'll say item dot, you'll have all access to all the properties, like item.author, item.datetime, item.summary, item.content. All of that will be, you can put a control space after the dot, and the nice thing is, you will get code completion inside of the Razor syntax. So you can see all the stuff available for you for items. You can go get it directly from there. Very, very powerful. My final thing I want to say, what happens if you added, for instance, a custom field, like maybe news doesn't have images. You cannot have a thumbnail image in news, but you can add that, right? So if I add my thumbnail image to the news, how am I going to access it in here? Let's say I called it thumbnail. Would I be able to say add item.thumbnail? You would expect something like that. That is not going to work in Sitefinity. Remember that. This is written based on the models, and the models didn't know anything about your custom field. So remember, there is something called an extension method inside of Sitefinity. It actually creates a scissor at the bottom of the virtual class in memory, and it plugs in all the rest of the additional properties at the bottom of that virtual class. It's much faster than keep jumping from one virtual table to the other in memory. It's a great way. But the only way you can get to it is by using something called getValue and setValue. So if you want to use a custom field, you cannot say item.thumbnail, but you'll say item.getValue thumbnail. There's also wrappers for it, for helpers, that's called meta.fields. And then you'll see the thumbnail over there. Does that make sense? So there is a way to play with all that stuff. Hopefully in this very quick 45 minutes, you were able to get a glimpse of, it's pretty easy once you play with it a little bit. It's actually a lot of fun to work with MVC. I want to open up for questions. Anybody have any questions? Absolutely, go ahead, man. What is the goal? I mean, is the goal, are you happy with the performance right now? No. Then yes. Yeah. If you're not happy with the, most people will move that route. And also, you want to embrace where Sitefinity is going as well. All the resources, all the investment in Sitefinity is completely MVC going forward. So if you take it every quarter, you move some of them until hopefully next 2 to 3 quarters, you're completely MVC. That's your investment to be on the same page with Sitefinity, and you'll be happier in the future. Make sense? Yes, it does. Absolutely. VSIX, it's called Sitefinity VSIX. We call it V6 really quickly. All right, I'm sorry? Oh yeah, it's really great. I know the next speaker is coming, but I'll be outside. We can actually talk outside if you don't mind. Thank you so much.